Hello world, Dino Mega here, and today we are creating drivable vehicles with item storage compartments using Unreal Engine 5. We'll be using Unreal's vehicle system, and this video will walk you through the initial setup so your player can enter, exit, and drive the Dune Buggy and sports car. We'll then take it a step further and attach our inventory components to our vehicles so we can let our players also use them as a portable way to store and transport items. The player will be able to access and use this storage while behind the wheel as well as from outside the vehicle. This should get you to a decent jump off point for your own game, and if there's something you'd like for me to follow up on, like consuming a fuel item as we drive, spotting vehicles at runtime, multiple storage compartments on a vehicle, or maybe you'd like to see how we make this all work in multiplayer. Whatever the case, please let me know in the comments below. The first thing I'm going to do is make a new project using Unreal Engine 5.2. Then I'm going to go ahead and add my inventory and item system asset to the project. Now you don't need my asset for the enter and exit vehicle, but if you want to also add storage to your vehicle, you will need it for that part. Next, click the add button on the content browser, then select add feature content pack. Then select the vehicle. After you add it, you might be prompted to enable a plugin for it, and you can go ahead and accept that. And if you don't get that prompt, click edit, then plugins, and then search for vehicle. Then select the checkbox to enable Chaos Vehicle plugin. Then you'll be prompted to restart your project, so go ahead and do that, and this plugin is required to use Unreal's vehicle system. Since I'm going to be working out of the demo world in my asset, I'm going to go ahead and open that now. Let's check out these vehicles. Go ahead and add a sports car to your level in the vehicle templates blueprint sports car folder. And if you get the can't add icon when you try to add it, make sure you have the Chaos Vehicle plugin enabled. Once it's enabled, you'll be able to add the blueprint to your world. Go ahead and also add the Dune Buggy, then open up both of the blueprints. As you can see, they both inherit from the wheeled vehicle pawn, which is something we don't have access to from Blueprint. We need a way to easily add logic to both of our cars without having to make changes inside each one every time. And if we add more cars in the future, we don't want to have to repeat this process for each and every one. To help us with this, what we want to do is make another blueprint, and we'll make this one a child of the wheeled vehicle pawn as well. But then we'll set both of our cars to be a child of this new vehicle base instead. Create a new folder in your content folder. I'm going to call mine vehicle storage. Then inside this folder, right click and create a new blueprint. From the all classes list, search for and select wheeled vehicle pawn. Then name your blueprint. I'm going to call mine BP_vehicle_base. Next, let's switch both the sports car and the Dune Buggy to use our new base class as their parent. Open each blueprint, then click Settings, then from the Details panel, change the parent class to BP_vehicle_base. Check the top right corner of each of your blueprints to confirm that they updated to your new BP vehicle base. When we press play, we can see the suspension is still working on them, and we don't get any errors, so they must still be working. Let's work on getting our player to enter the vehicle now. Open up your player controller, and since I'm using my demo world, I'm going to be using the one that's included, which is the example controller found in the blueprints folder. Next, add a new key binding to the player controller, and I'm going to use the G key. Now we will change this to use the included interaction system later in the video, but for now this is a quick and easy way to get us started. When we press our G key, we want to search near the player pawn, and if we find our vehicle, we want to possess it. Right-click in the graph and do a sphere overlap actors and hook it up to your key binder. For the sphere position, we want this to be on our player's pawn location. Right-click in the graph and search for get player pawn and select it, and then from that, select get actor location. And plug it in. And for the sphere radius, enter a modest value. I'm going to put 245 for mine. Then for object type, drag off and select make array. Then select vehicle. From the actor class filter, select our new BP_vehicle base. Hook a branch up to the return value so this only continues if it finds something. Then from the out actors array, drag off and select get, and then leave it at 0. This should return the closest vehicle to our pawn. From the true node, drag off and search for possess. Then try to hook up the value from our get node to it. And as you see, we can't do this yet because we have to first cast to our vehicle base class so it knows it's a pawn that we're trying to possess. From the cast node, hook up the return pin into the possess node. Press play, run up the vehicle, and press G to get in. You should see the camera change to the vehicle, but the input doesn't work and we still see our old pawn, so let's fix the input first. When we look at our vehicle blueprints, we see the input is being driven by an input mapping context. So to do this, they need to be adding the context somewhere. And for the vehicle system, they're going to be using the vehicle controller to do this, which we can find in the vehicle templates blueprints folder. So go ahead and open it up, and right on our begin play is where they're adding this mapping context. Let's go ahead and copy this, then return to our player controller, and then hook it up to our begin play. When we press play, we can see the camera works, but we still can't move, and this is happening because we are consuming these movement inputs in our third-person character. And we could play around with consume input settings on each input action, but a better way to manage this is just to add our mapping context when we enter the vehicle, then remove it when we get out. Since it's only really relevant when we're driving, we only really need to know about these inputs at that point. To do this, we just need to hook the add input mapping context up after our possess. Now when we try it, it works. And our Dune Buggy also works since we're doing all major logic on the base class instead of the individual car classes. Okay, so we can get in the vehicle and we can drive it, but our pawn is still standing there. Instead of hiding or deleting it, you'll most likely want to try and place them in a seat of the vehicle, and maybe even try to control their arms as they steer the wheel. But since this tutorial is not about posing or animations, but instead about the blueprint mechanics side of it all, we're going to keep it simple and just turn our pawn into our hood ornament. Now we know we want to snap our player's pawn somewhere on our vehicle, which means we need to add a socket to our vehicle skeleton. Let's open the sports car first, then select the mesh and browse to the skeletal mesh of it, then open it up. Since I'm making a hood ornament, I'm just going to create a socket right here on the root and call it hood socket. Then position it roughly where I want it to appear. I'm then going to add Quinn as our preview asset for the socket, then further tweak the position and rotation. Finally, I'm going to change the scale of it so it looks more like a hood ornament, and 0.15 seems to do the trick. Now we can finally attach our pawn to the socket, but before we do that, we need to save the reference to our vehicle and our original pawn so we can easily reuse them in our logic. Let's promote the reference coming out of our cast to a variable that we call vehicle. Then hook that up between the cast and the possess. We're also going to need to remember our original pawn before we get in the car so we can get back into it when we get out. So let's promote that value to a variable as well. We can do that coming out of the get player pawn at the start of our event. And I'll call this one original pawn.
Hello world, Timmy here. I just want to jump in and give you a friendly reminder that you should always make time to clean up your blueprints and add comments. That way you have a better idea of what you're thinking when you come back in here to make changes in a few months.
Thanks, Timmy. Now we're going to use this reference from our original pawn and do an attach actor to actor using our vehicle as the parent actor. And the socket name is the socket we entered in the skeleton, which for me was hood socket. Then set the transform settings to snap to target. When we press play and we try to move our vehicle, we can see the car starts to bounce around backwards, and this is because the collision on our pawn is actually fighting with our vehicle. Let's fix this by disabling the collision on our original pawn using the set actor collision enabled, with the checkbox set to false. Now when we press play, we don't have this issue, but it does look like our hood ornament is facing in the wrong direction. So let's tweak the socket rotation to fix that. What's happening here is our BP is actually rotating the mesh from its default. So we want to apply the same rotation to the socket so our pawn faces forward when we attach it. Another thing you may have noticed if you're using my equipment system is that our pawn is still able to swing while we're on the hood, which is hilarious, but it's probably not what you want to happen in your game. And this is intentional because our equipment system does not clear the reference for our pawn unless it detects that we possess something else that is using the equipment system. And while we can't actually equip equipment on our car out of the box in this version, and maybe we will in the next one, we can still trick the system so it ignores our pawn until we get back out of the vehicle. And to do this, we just need to add our BPI equipment to our base vehicle without setting anything up on it. Now when we try it out, we don't swing, and if you see these errors pop up, it's because you're not using the most recent version of the asset. And these errors are occurring because we're trying to work around our equipment system instead of through it. And there are manual update instructions on the Discord if you need them, but just to help you get by this specific point, what we need to do is make sure our my character reference it is trying to use is valid before this function tries to do anything else. And we just simply duplicate our my character reference and convert it to a validated get, and then connect at the very start of this function. Now when we try it out, everything works as expected, and our character doesn't swing and we don't see any of the errors. Unreal's vehicle system also comes with a little HUD that we can show that keeps track of our current speed and our gear. Let's take a look at the vehicle player controller provided by the vehicle system to see how it works. As you can see, right in the begin play, it is adding it to the screen. First, copy the part that's adding to the widget, and just like our input mapping, we want to only show this widget when we actually get in the car. So add this after our attach to actor on the hood ornament and collision update. After adding it, right click on the variable and create it since it doesn't exist yet on our end.
Dino, comments.
Yes, thank you, Timmy. Compile, save, and try it out. Now we just need to get it to update, and this is where they're using the tick for. So let's copy that over, and if we leave it as is, we will get errors as soon as we start the game. This is because we have an unknown variable. And we can get this reference from our vehicle reference, so let's look that up instead, and then press play. And it works, but when we stop the game, we notice a bunch of errors, and this is because the tick is always running, even before the HUD's actually been created. So this variable reference that it's trying to use does not exist at that point in time when these errors occur. And to fix this, we just need to make sure the reference is valid before we continue on that part of the tick. So go ahead and right click on the first vehicle HUD reference, convert it to a validated get, and then hook it back up. Now it works and we don't have any errors. Now it's time to let our character exit the vehicle and return to the world. What I want to happen when we press G while we're inside the vehicle is to exit the vehicle. And everything we have connected currently to our G key is just getting into our vehicle. So let's collapse it all into a new function called enter vehicle. Right now when we press G again while we're inside, we'll see some funky stuff happen with the UI, and then a warning will appear about the vehicle trying to attach to itself. Inside our enter vehicle function is where we set our vehicle variable, and we know if this variable is valid, then we must be inside our vehicle. So let's use this variable at the start of our G key event and convert it to a validated get. And if it is valid, that means we are in the vehicle. And if it's not valid, then we know we want to get in the vehicle. Now when we press the G key while we are in it, none of the weirdness happens anymore. And we also don't have a point to start working on our exit vehicle logic from the isValid path. Let's take a look at our enter vehicle function and see what all we need to undo. This first part we don't have to worry about since this is all about detecting the vehicle and remembering who our pawn is. But we do need to remove our input mapping context as well as detach our pawn from the hood. We also need to remove our vehicle HUD. Then after all that, we need to repossess our original pawn. And at the very end, we can clear out our vehicle variable, so the next time we try to enter a vehicle, we can. Let's start at the top. Let's first remove the input mapping. And I'm going to copy this enhanced input local player subsystem and paste it in the graph. Then from it, drag off and select remove mapping context. For the mapping context, I'm going to switch back to my enter vehicle function and click on the magnifying glass. This way it navigates my content browser to it. Then back in my event graph, I click on the left arrow in a circle icon to use the selected item for my content browser, which is our mapping context. Then hook this up to the isValid path. Let's go ahead and collapse this into a function that we call exit vehicle. That way we can keep our graph nice and neat. Next, let's remove the HUD. Drop a get reference to the vehicle HUD in the graph and then remove from parent from it. Then clear the variable by hooking up a set node with nothing plugged into the value. This clearing of the variable is important since this is what our tick is checking for to see if it should update the vehicle HUD or not. And we want to stop the tick when the HUD is removed, so clearing this variable makes sure that also happens for us. Next, we want to detach our pawn from the hood and repossess it. To do this, we drop a reference to our original pawn in, and from it, do a detach from active. Then after the detach call, do a possess node using our original pawn. Press play and see what happens. Well, we do seem to be back on our pawn, but we're off the map, and this is because our transform is being zeroed out. Let's set it to keep world for the detached transform settings and see what happens. Now we're in the same general location as the hood ornament, but stuck under the car. And we can jump to get out of it, but our scale is still the size of the hood ornament. We also seem to be falling through the floor. Well, what I want to do is obviously fix the scale, but also make the player get out on the driver's side of the car. And to do this, let's head back into our skeleton for the sports car and add another socket. I'm going to call this one player exit, and I'm going to position it on the side of my car. Then in our graph, make some room before the detach and drop a reference to the original pawn in. From it, drag off and make another attach actor to actor node, using the vehicle as the parent again. And this time, enter player exit as a socket name. Then set the transform settings to snap the target for each one and then try it out. And it appears to be working, but our character isn't moving and we still have the issue where we're falling through the floor. And both of these are happening because we disabled our collision when we attached it to the hood ornament. Well, back in our exit vehicle graph, after we do the detach and before we do the possess, let's call the set actor collision enabled and set it to true and try it out. And it works, and we can get out, but we can't get back in. And when we try, we get some errors. And this is happening because we also have to clear our vehicle variable. Remember our isValid check at the start of our G key? This is what we're hitting. Head back to the exit vehicle function. At the very end of it, do a set on the vehicle variable with nothing as the value. Now you can get in and out just as you expect. And one thing you might have noticed is if you're holding down a movement key while you exit the vehicle will keep going. And this is just how the Unreal vehicle system works. We have to actually tell it to stop. And to make it stop as soon as we get out, we need to call the stop movement immediately on the vehicle movement component. And we need to do this before we possess our original pawn while we're still in control of the vehicle. So make some room before you possess, then get a reference to your vehicle variable, and then from this get a reference to the vehicle movement component. Then call the stop moving immediately function from this reference. Now when we get out of the vehicle, we'll stop immediately. And there are functions inside this vehicle you can play with to try and slow it down gradually instead of suddenly. Also based on the same logic, if we keep running when we get in the vehicle, it looks like our hood ornament keeps moving. So we need to call a stop moving immediately on the pawn as well when we enter the vehicle. Now back in the enter vehicle function, make some room before the possess on the vehicle variable. I'm going to disconnect it and just hook up another reference to it instead of extending the wire. Then at this point, I'm going to call cast a character using our original pawn. Then from this, we can get the character movement component we need to call the stop movement immediately function. Go ahead and hook everything up and try it out. We can now get in and out of the sports car and everything seems to be working just fine. Now we're not done yet. Our Dune Buggy still has a few issues. As you can see when we get in, we're not on the hood and we appear to be stuck under the car. And this is happening because our Dune Buggy doesn't have our hood socket and player exit sockets yet. So let's go ahead and add those. Open up the off-road car pawn BP, select the main mesh, then navigate to the skeletal mesh and open it up. Now by default, you won't see the buggy. You'll just see the suspension and the brake pads, and this is normal. And to make it easier on you to find where to position your sockets, you can add a preview mesh of the off-road vehicle from the off-road car bone. Right-click, add preview mesh, and search for off-road, and then select it. Now you should have a better idea where you position your hood socket and your player exit socket. For the hood socket, make sure you set the scale to 0.15. And for the player exit, make sure it's slightly raised in the air. Now when we try it out, everything works fine. And this is the beauty of inheritance. Even though we did everything entirely in the sports car, because we have the shared common blueprint that the rest of the code is referencing, the only thing we need to add to this new vehicle is set up the sockets. And this will make it very easy when you add more vehicles to the mix. Now before we call the vehicle portion of this tutorial complete, there is one small issue we need to fix, and that is if we try to exit our vehicle while it's at a weird angle, and it does some goofy stuff with our camera. To fix this, we just need to reset the rotation on our pawn when we exit the vehicle. So head back into the exit vehicle function, and before the possess call, set an active rotation and hook your pawn up to it. We want to keep our current Z value so the player is facing the same way when they exit the vehicle. We can just get our current Z value and feed that back into where we're setting our rotation. Then try it out. And that's perfect. At this point, we have a basic vehicle system that we can use with a variety of vehicles. And the player can get in and out as they want. And when the player gets in, we turn them into the hood ornament. And when they get back out, they turn back into their original pawn. To continue beyond this point, you will need to have my inventory and item system set up and installed in your project. And if you haven't done that yet, make sure you follow through the core setup in the first few minutes of the setup video before you continue with this one. Let's now hook this up to our interaction system. That way we can use our E key to get in and out of the vehicle and also show our interact prompt to drive the vehicle when we get in range of it. To do this, let's make a child blueprint of BP_interactable in the Blueprints Interactables folder. And I'm going to call mine BP_interactable_vehicle. Next, open this new blueprint up, and in the get interactable info function, enter vehicle into the name and drive into action. Now we need to attach this interactable vehicle BP to our cars. And since we have that base vehicle that is being used by both of them, we can add this child blueprint there. Head on into the base vehicle blueprint and then add a component and search for child actor and select it. Then from the details panel, select our BP_interactable_vehicle. If you try it out, you'll be able to see our press E to drive alert when we get close to the vehicle, but it doesn't actually work yet because we still haven't told it what we want it to do when we interact with it. What we want to do is call this code that we are currently doing on our G key in our controller. And since we don't need this G key anymore, let's go ahead and replace it with the new event we call enter exit vehicle. Then back in our BP interactable vehicle, let's override the action event. And from this event, let's cast to our controller. And for me, that's example player controller. And if you're not using the demo world like me, you'll want to make sure you cast to your own. Then from this cast, we call this event we created enter exit vehicle. And if you don't see this event, you're most likely cast into the wrong actor. We can now use the E key to get in and out of our car. However, when we get in, the little prompt says press E to drive still. To hide this prompt when we are inside, let's head back into our enter vehicle function. And this time we need to get a reference to this interact widget. And we can find this inside our AC_inventory item systems UI_item system reference. Search for interact to find the UI_interact nearby. From this reference, we want to set the visibility to collapsed. Then over in our exit vehicle function, we do the opposite and set it to not hit testable self and all children, which just means make it visible and you can't click anything inside it. Go ahead and give it a try. Now you shouldn't see the notice anymore when you're inside the car. We are finally at the point where we can start working on our storage, and the first thing we need to do is attach our AC_inventory component to the car. So open the BP_vehicle_base, then add another component and search for the inventory component. Make sure you do not select the inventory system. We want just the inventory component. Now we need a way to show the contents of this component, and we're going to use a UI from a key binding to do this. So let's work on the UI side of it first. And I want to use our storage container UI, so let's take a look at that. Navigate to the UI's container storage container folder, then navigate to the event graph. As you can see in our construct event, we're using a variable called container, which is of type BP interactable container. And since we're not using this BP for our car, we can't just use this code as is, at least anywhere where this is mentioned. Fortunately for us, it's just in these two locations right next to each other. Now this change I'm about to do might already be done for you depending on when you're watching this video. And if you see a setup container event in this location already, you do not need to do this step. But if you don't see this, here's what we need to do. Create a new event and call it setup container. Then move these two things related to the container over to it. And then we just call this new event from where the stuff originally was. Now we can make a child of the storage UI and just override the event with whatever we need to get it to work for us in our vehicle. Now back in our content browser, let's make a new child of the storage container UI. And unlike a normal blueprint, we can't just right click on it to make a child. We have to actually create a new widget. Then from the classes list, select the widget we want to use. So select the storage container one. And I'm going to call mine UI_vehicle storage container. Go ahead and open it up, then override the setup container event we just created in the parent. And the first thing we need to do is set this container inventory variable, which is an AC_inventory component reference, just like the one we added to our vehicle. So let's set this variable, and we'll promote the input to another variable that we'll call vehicle inventory, and then set this to instance editable and expose on spawn. When we create this widget, we'll feed in this AC inventory component reference into the blueprint. The other thing we're doing on our setup container event is setting the name on the window. And to keep it simple, I'm just going to set it to vehicle. But if you wanted to get this variable from the vehicle, we just promote this to a variable as well and make it instance editable and expose on spawn, and then feed it in from the same place we feed the vehicle inventory component in at. Now we can't see this UI just yet. We still need to tell our code when to show it on the screen. And the way the current storage container works is through our UI_item system in the UIs folder. It calls this show container event, and this does a few things and creates the widget on the screen. And we can't use this as is, as we are not using the container BP it's depending on. And we also want to feed our inventory component into this function. So instead, let's duplicate this function and make our changes to the copy. And I'm going to call my copy try show vehicle. The first thing I'm going to do is remove these variables being set that have to do with the containers. Since these relate to the BP interactable container, which we're not using here, it makes no sense to deal with them at this point. Then we want to update this UI to use our UI_vehicle storage container instead. I'm also going to remove the container variable that was connected to the create widget, as well as remove the input for it on the function. And to get our inventory component, I'm just going to go ahead and hook this up to the input. That way we can feed it in when we call this function. Now let's head back to the event graph and make an event that calls this function for us. I'm going to call this one show vehicle. Then I'm going to hook the function we just created up to it and connect the input pin for the inventory component to the event so it creates it there as well for us. Now we just need to call this show vehicle whenever we want to show our vehicle storage, and we'll do that back in our controller. Head back into your controller and create a key binding event, and for me I'm going to go with my R key. Drag a reference for the AC inventory item system out and select UI item system from it. Then call our show vehicle event. Now we just need to hook up our inventory component to it, which we could get from our vehicle variable, but then this will only work while we're inside this vehicle since we're unsetting this variable when we exit the vehicle. Instead, let's use the same sphere overlap actors we used when we were trying to get into the nearby vehicle. So I'm going to open up the enter vehicle function, and I'm going to collapse everything related to the sphere overlap and up to the point of setting the vehicle variable into a new macro that I call get nearby vehicle. Now we can then reuse this macro back in our key binding to get the nearby vehicle from our player's pawn. From this, we can get the inventory component reference we need. Hook everything up and try it out. Go ahead and run up to a vehicle and press your key binding. And for me, that was R. And now we have a working vehicle storage that works from outside the car and from behind the wheel. However, when we close the vehicle storage, we get some kind of error. And if we click on this error, it takes us to the middle of the AC inventory item system. Now this event is being called by the one right next to it, but let's see what this original event is being called from by right-clicking on it and then select Find References. And then expand the search to find in all blueprints by clicking on the binoculars icon. Then we can see our UI item system is calling it in our try hide container function. And this is being called from our try show vehicle function when we're trying to close the vehicle storage. So what we really want to do is only do this stuff related to the container if the container is actually valid. So let's convert that to a validated get and then try it out. And it seems to have resolved our error. Now the last thing we need to do is make it so it auto closes when we run away from the vehicle. So right now it just stays open until we manually close it. The way this auto closer works for everything else is inside the AC_inventory item system. And what happens is we ping the distance between the player and the last interactable object. If it is above a certain threshold, we tell the UI system to close the active window. Well, the current interactable variable is set through the interaction system, which we're not actually using to open the inventory since we're using that to get in and out of the vehicle instead. To get this to work, we have to actually trick the system because by default, it's only going to pick up things that are inherent from the BP_interactable. So the easiest solution is just to manually set this current interactable variable to what we need it to be. This variable is of type actor, which gives us the flexibility to set it to whatever we need. And for the part that checks the distance, this works alongside the interaction system, but does not depend on it. All it depends on is the value of this variable being set to a valid actor. So we need to set this variable manually when we open our vehicle storage container. Back in our controller, right after you show the vehicle, drag from the AC_inventory item system reference, and then set the current interactable variable. And for the value, set it to the vehicle. The last thing we need to do is add the interactable BP to the BP vehicle base. Since this is what we are setting our current interactable variable to, the system is going to call this function on this actor to find out what type of window it needs to tell the system to close. So back on our vehicle base, click settings and then the add button on the implemented interfaces and then select BPI interact. Then open the get interactable data function, and for this one set the type to storage container. Go ahead and give it a test drive, and now everything appears to be working. And there you have it, a fully functional vehicle with built-in storage compartment. We had to do a few tricks to make it all work in this version of my system, but that just goes with the job of being a developer. We have to be ready to adapt and make changes. As I mentioned in the intro, where we go from this point in this vehicle storage system is up to you. And if you run into any bugs with this tutorial, please let me know in the comments or through Discord. Until next time, thanks for watching and supporting this project, and good luck with your game.